Did you get a microphone? Can I bring you one?
We're shaming those who come in late, Mario.
I'll bring you one.
Okay,
You mind?
recording all. Okay. We are about to get started. We have lots of fog here in Rockport today.
Anybody else? You want a microphone? Mario's not bashful.
So Scott's still not sleeping well, but so last night I decided to compete with him by driving to San Antonio and back and not coming home until midnight. So if either one of us don't sound like we have lack of sleep, huh?
We do.
But we got this.
But I have less pain. I slept about 15 minutes last night, but I'm hurting less than I have been, and I'll take it. You learn to appreciate the good days, don't you? Maybe that's the lesson here.
Okay, lots of people to pray for.
There are. So Jack Vogel is with us. His operation was successful. He looks like, I'm trying to say, he looks like somebody in an old Western movie, like he got hung. He's got this thing going around his neck right now. And I told him if I had known you were going to go get in a fight, I'd have come with you or something. It's terrible. But he got up like after the operation and got dressed and sitting on the side of the bed, and the doctor just said, go home. I don't know. He had said, there's no way I'm letting you go home the first day. And Jack's like, what is it, the irresistible force? And the doctor was not the immovable object. So he is with us.
And they got the cancer, so that's good.
They did. I can't tell what all he sounds a lot. I told him he sounds a little like he's been breathing helium this morning. But he's doing well. Bob Sims, Bob and Julie, and Green Bay, that family. Bob had AFib and they had to shock him. Is that right?
Yeah.
But they're in Hawaii. So that seems like good news.
That's halfway to paradise.
Yeah, and compared to getting shocked in your heart, it's all the way to paradise. Anyway, we have Kathy's not with us. I talked to her during the week. She was really hoping to be here, but Alton is not doing well. And you asked for special prayer for Cherie. She's not doing well. We have those 4 people, Cherie and Phil and Alton and Kathy, all the time right now. These are difficult times. And Robin Hazard, is Robin with us?
Yes, she is.
Hi, Robin. And this is your brother-in-law, right? I don't see her.
She's right there.
Okay, well, I can't see
Yes.
it. Yes. Anyway, so your brother-in-law, Robin's brother-in-law, has been in remission for pancreatic cancer, which is not good. And he's been in remission, but they found a spot on the tail of it. And she's, she and the family are asking for prayers, and please try and remember these. We have so much to be thankful for, and we have these ones that we're so concerned about. So we wait for some word on some of them. God, you show faithfulness in your word, in your scriptures, and you show faithfulness to us. You bring people together who seek you and seek your will. We learn with each other and through each other, and we're grateful for that. We start this study on what we call Easter, on the sacrifice, the atonement, the resurrection. And this is so important. Guide us, be with us, help us to find those things that strengthen our faith and draw us closer. Amen.
Okay. So as Scott says, we're starting a 4-week study on the what and the why. Excuse me one more time. The what and the why of the Passover as we prepare for Easter. And Scott's going to start with a short story, or Yes.
Yeah, so this is one of those times. This is the lead up to Easter, but it reminded me this week there was a fishing website, that I used to get on.
And that's how we met.
That's
Jack.
how we met Jack, so Jack's well aware of this. But there was one year, two guys were talking, they got in a discussion and somehow Easter came up. And one of the guys just blows up. And he says, that's a pagan holiday. You're celebrating a pagan holiday. Yeah. And the other guy's saying, no, I'm not celebrating a pagan holiday. Yeah, you are. Well, again, this guy has been taught by someone. So, I mean, he knows what he's talking about. And he's just browbeating this other guy about the pagan holiday. And the other guy's looking like some help here because he doesn't know what to do about this. And he's looking, like I'm supposed to help him out. So I asked the know-it-all guy, I said, what day do you go to church? And he says, oh, I know what you're doing. No, that's different because it's not Sabbath, but we celebrate, that's the day Jesus was raised from the dead, and that's why we do it. And I said, no, just answer the question. What day do you go to church? Sunday. And I said, okay. Sunday, Moon Day, Tears Day, Odin's Day, Thor's Day, Freya's Day, and Saturn Day. So I said, you had a choice, I guess, between worshiping on the Saturn Day or the day of the sun god. And you picked, and I said, every single day you celebrate a pagan holiday by your theory. And he was very upset at me, you can imagine. But I said, you can't get around it. And I said, so you're telling me you're not celebrating pagan holidays, even though, and no, I'm not. I said, well, neither is this guy celebrating a pagan holiday because he observes Easter. And that's one of the things I know a lot of people that have heard this about the pagan holidays. There have been human beings, there are billions of human beings on this planet over thousands and thousands of years, and there's only 365 days in a year. So they're all spoken for, right? I mean, you're going to overlap somebody's something, no matter what you do. We couldn't have picked a different day and had it not overlap anybody. So kind of at the beginning of this, if that has ever come up and you're, I would say that probably most of us were raised with the idea that Easter is eggs and bunnies and all that. And that's stuff that we have to unlearn. When you grow up with that, it's in the back of your head somehow. And if we say, when we become grown-ups and we want to really understand what's going on, we have to, there's Kathy. We have to find a way to leave behind some of that stuff, and worrying about it is part of it. So a big part of this study is going to be for us to see what's really there. I mean, the basics, but there is so much more about Easter. So I think Mary wants to start.
So of those of us, especially that were raised in the Catholic tradition, when we prepare for Easter, it's Lent. Okay. Just a couple things out there to remember. Lent is not in the Bible. Lent is a 40-day preparation. It was first talked about, or the first Lent was after 325 AD, which was the Nicene Council. One day we're going to have to study the Nicene Council. Most of the stuff that we do in Christianity came from the Nicene Council. So in 325, they instituted Lent. It was 40 days. Why 40 days? It's the preparation for Easter, and it is to remember the 40 days that Jesus spent in the desert preparing for his ministry. And many of us grew up in this idea of Lent. You give up something, sacrifice, get ready for Easter. So, that's just some, remembrance of, or some education of what Lent is. what we're going to study these 4 weeks is Passover. As we know it in the Easter story, it's the Last Supper, and this is amazing. We were talking the other day about why sometimes I'm just always intrigued that sometimes Bible studies seem boring, and they're not boring, because this book is amazing, and this story of how we got to this Last Supper is amazing. So this week we're going to look at the first and second celebration of the Passover. But to do that, we have to go back to, let me make sure, we have to go back to Genesis 15. Okay, so we're back in Genesis 15, which is when Abraham made the covenant with God. So we're way, the first Passover is during Exodus and Moses's time. So we are 400 years before Moses, and we're in Genesis. And do you want to set the scene of, or maybe I'll just read this, when Abraham made the promise?
Not good.
Okay, so we're in Genesis 15, verses 5 through 7, I believe. And the Lord took him outside and said, so he's talking to Abram. He hadn't been named Abraham yet, or renamed Abraham. And the Lord took him outside and said, now look to the heavens and count the stars, if you are able. Then he told him, so shall your offspring be. Abram believed the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness.
One of the really strong passages in the Bible that God speaks to Abraham, and we did that study on Jacob, and we covered some of this, but he speaks to Abraham, and Abraham just said, yeah, okay, and followed him. It says he believed, and it was counted unto him as righteousness. And that's it's a pretty big statement. I would like to be in those shoes, right? Of having God count, you're counted unto you as righteousness. So this is this was a strong thing. And you want to go ahead with it?
Yeah, so this is, so God promises to Abraham that he is going to make him this big nation. It's the covenant. But it's about 30 years later when Sarah has had Isaac, and God tells Abraham to go up to the mountain and sacrifice his son. You remember that. So that's approximately 30 years later. So now we're in Genesis 22. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. One more thing back at Genesis 15. I apologize. Genesis 15, verses 13. The Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. But I will judge the nations they serve as slaves, and afterwards they will depart with many possessions. You, however, will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a ripe old age. Okay, so here he is talking about what's going to happen 400 years from now. And he says, your people, all these people, your family will be foreigners in a country. They will be in Egypt. They will be slaves in Egypt. He is telling Abraham 400 years in advance.
He doesn't say Egypt, but he describes them being.
You will be enslaved and mistreated for 400 years. But I will judge the nations they serve as slaves, and afterwards they will depart with many possessions. So he's telling Abraham there will be an exodus 400 years, which I don't know, amazing to me. Okay.
They play the long game. The Jews play the long game, right? I mean, 400 years in captivity, not captivity the whole time, but 400 years in exile, and they never give up. They never lose sight of the promise. And you find out that part's been promised to them as well. And the more we go through this, the more you begin to see, we talk a lot about this long, long plan. And the exile in Egypt was prophesied 400 years earlier, was told directly to Abraham. And they go into exile, but those of you who weren't part of that study, I'll mention again that Abraham had been led into this promised land, but they were beset on all sides. They're constantly at war. And he winds up taking them down through Jacob. You remember Jacob gets sold into slavery and winds up being Pharaoh's #1 guy. And all of the Jews, all of the Israelites get brought down into Egypt, and they get put in the land of Goshen. And in Goshen, none of the Egyptians want to mess with them, because that's where all the cattle people live, those dirty, people who raise cattle. So they've got this fabulous place, and nobody messes with them. And they're able to just multiply, and they get wealthy, and they get powerful, and they become the great nation that Abraham had been promised they would be. And it's this old plan. I mean, we see it, but we also see so many of the parallels as we go through this between what happens here at the Passover and what happens at the Passover, when Jesus dies, when he goes to Jerusalem. The parallels, the symmetry between them, this is all one big long plan. And so, yeah, there's the start. Mary mentioned the thing about Abraham being told to sacrifice his son.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna read that part first.
Well, you
Okay,
said it.
yeah, I know, but I'm gonna read it. So we're in Genesis 22, verse 11. Just then the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him," said the angel. "For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your only son from me." Then Abraham looked up and saw behind him a ram in a thicket, caught by its horns. So he went and took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in place of his son. And Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." So to this day, it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided." And the angel of the Lord said to Abraham from heaven a second time, saying, By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your only son, I will surely bless you, and I will multiply your descendants like the stars in the sky and the sand in the seashore. Your descendants will possess the gates of their enemies, and through your offspring, all nations of the earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice.
So here's Abraham with his son. You remember they were too old to have children. And God has promised Abraham, you'll be the father of a great nation. And Abraham's reached a point, he says, how is that going to happen? We're too old. And they're given this child in their old age. And then he's told, okay, taking him up on the mountain and sacrifice him. And people are just appalled by this. A lot of people that don't really understand what we're doing here, but they're appalled by it. But what's going on here, and what you have to see, is that there's a sacrifice scheduled, right? There's a death, and God provides a substitute. Now,
Sound familiar?
what we want to see, remember, is we're trying to show how all of this is the foreshadowing of what happens when Jesus sacrifices himself in atonement for us. But the idea behind this was not to get Abraham to kill his son. The idea behind this was to see that, and for Abraham, I think, to see the commitment that he has to make that decision, and God provides a substitute. That's what happens all those years later in Jerusalem, is the substitute. So as we begin to go through these, you see the parallel. The plan becomes, ever more clear.
So like I warned you, I'm going to skip around a little bit. I'm in Exodus now. So I'm 400 years later, and we're going to study Exodus 12, but I'm going to go to the end of Exodus 12 to verse 40, because there's a question. So do we know when Abraham did that sacrifice or was asked to sacrifice his son? And the answer is yes, we know the day it was. And Scott, when we first started studying that, he was like, really? And anyhow, we kept studying it. So
The things that you miss, you study this for years, and these things that you just read right over.
So I'm in Exodus 12, verse 40. Now the duration of the Israelites' stay in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430 years, to the very day, all the Lord's divisions went out of the land of Egypt, because the Lord kept a vigil that night to bring them out of the land of Egypt. This same night is to be a vigil to the Lord, to be observed by all the Israelites for the generations to come. So the 430 years takes it all the way back to when God promised Abraham that he was going to have a son. But he says it's the thing I want you, it's the very day. So what is that very day? If we start at the first Passover, we're at Exodus chapter 12. Now the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, this month is the beginning of months for you. It shall be the first month of the year. Tell the whole congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man must select a lamb for his family, one per household. If the household is too small for a whole lamb, they are to share with the nearest neighbor based on the number of people and the portion of the lamb accordingly.
So the first month of the Jewish calendar is lunar. So it doesn't agree with it's very confusing. Their events, their Sabbaths are at different times every year. I mean, you can't say, okay, well, it was on March 15th this year, so it'll be close to that next year. I mean, it could be a month different.
That's why Easter is always a different day.
And it's actually, they calculate everything to the growing seasons and the harvest seasons, but the first month is called Nisan. It's just like the car, Nissans. That's the first month of the Hebrew calendar, and God says, and so he says on this day. Well, we were told, and Mary read that, and it just kind of, I couldn't believe I didn't ever notice it, but it actually tells us that's the exact day that it was. It was on the 14th of Nisan, and I don't know why. I can't explain it, but you see the pattern and you see the plan.
So the bigger picture to step back is God made the covenant with Abraham on the 14th day of the first month, 14th of Nisan. The Passover meal that we're going to study was on the 14th, 400 years later, was on the 430 days later, was on the 14th day of the first month of the year, Nisan. The Last Supper was on the 14th day of the first month, Nisan. I mean, that is just all the way through the 14th day of the first month.
It's not as surprising when you realize that the way their calendar works. This is Passover, and that was the plan. But it tells us just point blank, it's the same day. It's the 14th of Nisan.
Now, so remind people what's going on with when God says this. What has happened with the plagues?
Well, yes.
I have a question before you go, please. So y'all saying that the 14th, but in verse 3 says, tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, every man shall take a lamb according to their father's
Yes.
house.
Yep, and
So
we're gonna
the-
cover, we're gonna
Yeah,
cover
it's gonna
that.
get on.
We're
yeah.
gonna cover that, but it's not what it sounds like.
Okay.
So what some of these things that I hope we can get you to see. With Abraham, when he's told to lead Isaac up on the mountain, right? There's no hope. He doesn't understand. He's been promised that his descendants will be a great nation. And now he's being told, your son's going to be sacrificed. And he doesn't understand, how can it happen now? But he has to trust. He trusts God, and it's counted unto him as righteousness. Later on, when Israel is in Egypt, they have no hope. They can't possibly overcome Egypt. They've gotten so large and they have wealth. The old Pharaoh is gone. A couple of Pharaohs have come in. But here's the thing that has happened is that the nation of Israel, living in the middle of Egypt, they have wealth. They control the cattle. Egypt needs them. But at the same time, Egypt is scared of them. Right? The Pharaoh's afraid they're going to rise up and take over. So they're sort of, there's
So
the,
they've made them slaves now.
but what they've done in order to try and control them is get very brutal, right? We're gonna beat people and beat them to death and rule through fear. So the Israelites living in Egypt have no hope, and they haven't for a long time. They're in a place, they've been led down there so they could prosper, but now they're in a place where there's no logical way that they could ever escape. None. The Egypt is much too powerful. There's a lot of Israelites, but Egypt is the most powerful thing in that part of the world. So the only way they could be delivered is if this comes straight from God himself. And he puts them in a position where they have to recognize that. Does that make sense? We get put in, and I say we, I can tell you me. But there are times where we get put in those same situations, and you look and it seems hopeless, and then you see this deliverance take place. Well, that's what's happened. Flash forward to when Jesus goes, we are in bondage. The Jews are in bondage to Rome, but we are in bondage to sin, and we are hopeless. And then he provides a substitute. He provides a sacrifice in atonement. And the parallels, the symmetry between these is almost shocking, and it's intended to be. And so there's never a point where they're able to say, we'll take it from here, God. We don't, I mean, that's been our humans' problem, is that when things are going good, we don't need God. When things go bad is when we suddenly come back, no, help us, please. But they've been forced into a position where they can't get cocky about this. They have to depend on God. This is the story of the Exodus, and this is the story of Jesus' sacrifice all those years later. It's a different version of the same story going on.
So we're on, but tell them about the plagues. So there's been plagues.
The plagues, and there's the other thing. So most of you know the story, but Moses has been sent in. God says, you're gonna go tell the Pharaoh to let your people go, or let my people go, right? And Moses, I don't think he's gonna listen to me. I'm not a very good speaker. Does it sound like, I know it sounds like me. So he says, fine, I'll send your brother, but you're going to go do this. So he starts sending these plagues. He gives signs. And what Pharaoh does is, after the first plague, it's terrible. And Pharaoh goes, oh my gosh, I'll let you guys go. And then he sleeps on it. He says, I'm not letting you go. And you see the pride of a king saying, I'm not going to let you low-life people tell me how to rule my country. And you just telling me that you're going to leave. doesn't mean you're going to leave. Part of him, as I said, they don't want him there, but they can't afford to let him go. And he's so the first plague, he says, oh, this is terrible, I'll let you go. And then the next morning he decides, I don't think so. It's not that bad, and it's over. And so here comes the second and the third and the fourth, and they're very unpleasant, as you can see. And so they go through 9 of these plagues. And each time it's afterwards, it's Pharaoh going, you know what, we withstood this plague. I don't have to listen to you. You aren't leaving. So now comes the lead up. And that's the question, Mario, that you asked.
So we're at, if you go back to Exodus 11, God says, now I'm going to tell you what the 10th plague is going to be. So then the Lord said to Moses, I will bring upon Pharaoh and Egypt
What verse?
one more plague.
What verse?
Verse 1, sorry.
Sorry.
Then the Lord said to Moses, I will bring upon Pharaoh and Egypt one more plague. After that, he will allow you to leave this place. And when he lets you go, he will drive you out completely. Now announce to the people that the men and the women alike should ask their neighbors for articles of silver and gold. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, Moses himself was highly regarded in Egypt by Pharaoh's officials and by the people. And let me see what it says. So Moses, I'm sorry, verse 4. So Moses declared, this is what the Lord says. About midnight, I will go throughout Egypt, and every firstborn son in the land of Egypt will die, from the firstborn of the Pharaoh who sits on his throne to the firstborn of the servant girl behind the handmill, as well as the firstborn of all the cattle. Then a great cry will go out over all the land of Egypt. Such an outcry will have never been heard before, and it will never be heard again. But among all the Israelites, not even a dog will snarl at man or at beast. So God announces this is going to be the 10th plague, and this time Pharaoh is really going to let you go. So now we get to what they're supposed to do the night before.
Well, it's not just the night before. I talked about the pagan celebration, right? There are people that'll tell you, if you celebrate Easter, you're celebrating a pagan holiday. And they don't really understand. And a lot of us fall prey to that. We start to worry. They do the same thing with Jesus being in the grave for 3 days. Remember, on the 3rd day, he's going to rise. Well, they look at this and they start counting. Well, it could have been on Sunday because that wasn't 3 days and everything. So let's talk about this.
What a day is.
Yeah, I guess we can start there. We have a hard time talking about days in the Jewish calendar, because for the Jewish calendar, the day begins at sunset, right? That's when a day begins, is at sunset. It's after the sun has, gone below the horizon. There's the beginning of the day. But you can't deny that's also when night begins, right? That's when it gets dark. So it's the beginning of day and it's the beginning of night. And we try and go back after the fact and read this stuff, and it gets confusing. You have to work at it, or you just have to have a little faith and go, yeah, you know what? It sounds right to me. But what he says is that on the 10th of Nisan, I want the men, and so remember, this Passover happens on the 14th, but on the 10th, I want all of the men to go out, and you're going to select a lamb on the 10th. That's what's going on the 10th. That's the date they pick out the lamb, and it's supposed to be a spotless lamb, and they're supposed to, have it ready. But it tells them, and it actually says, you're going to go out, you're going to select the lamb on the 10th, but when it comes time for the sacrifice, you're going to sacrifice it in the hours between the sunsets. Have you ever read that? Have you read it?
No, not yet.
I always skip ahead.
Show me,
Yeah, go
okay.
ahead.
So I'm going to start again at just 12:1, just so it flows better. Now the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron in the land of Egypt, this is the month. This month is the beginning of the months for you. It shall be the first month of your year. Tell the whole congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man must select a lamb for his family, one per household. If the household is too small for a whole lamb, they are to share with their nearest neighbor based on the number of people and the portion of the lamb accordingly. Your lamb must be unblemished, year-old male, and you may take it from the sheep or the goats. You must keep it until the 14th day of the month, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel will slaughter the animal at twilight. And that's in the Berean Bible. It says twilight, and it is footnoted to mean between the two evenings. That's
Between the two evenings.
When is that?
So it's twilight, sunset?
Yes.
You know, we have civil twilight and nautical twilight now, right? I mean, there's not just one thing. So what happens is when the sun drops below the horizon, that's the first sunset. And then when all the light finally fades and it goes dark, that's the second one. And what they've been told is, I want you to go select the lamb, the spotless lamb, and keep it, hold on to it. And on the 14th, between in that evening time, that's twilight, between the time when the sun, actually goes down, but there's still light, between then and when it gets dark, this is when you're going to sacrifice the lamb.
And I have to do it in days, so it makes sense to me. So let's just say that we're talking Wednesday at 5 o'clock. The sun goes down and they're supposed to be basically between 5 and 5:30 or 5:30 and 6, whatever. They are to slaughter the lamb at 5 o'clock on Wednesday. That to us is Wednesday. To them, that's the beginning of Thursday. Okay, so that's where that is, the day starts at when the sun goes down. And so to me, it's Wednesday at 5 o'clock.
Wednesday evening is actually the beginning of Thursday for them.
Okay, so now let's
Wednesday
keep,
evening, clarify, just for clarification, okay? So they pick the lamb on the 10th day.
right,
So
Yes.
let's just, for argument's sake, for, education for ignorant people like me. So let's say the 10th is on a Monday, okay? So Tuesday, Wednesday the 12th, Thursday the 13th. Now, are you saying that on Thursday at twilight, which we said is whatever, 5 to 5:30 or 5:30 to 6, is when they're supposed to slaughter the lamb, because that's technically the beginning of the 14th?
that's
Am
right.
I getting it
Yes,
somewhat
correct.
correct? Okay.
So
All right.
for our calendar, so we can make sense for it, how we do Easter and Last Supper and everything else, let's just think of it as Wednesday night at 5 to 5:30,
For
okay?
now, let's not focus so much on the dates,
Okay,
with just the understanding that this begins at evening time. And they're told after they sacrifice it, then they're to go in, take the blood.
let me read this.
Okay,
They are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the house where they eat the lambs. They are to eat the meat that night, roasted over the fire, along with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat any of the meat raw or cooked in boiling water, but only roasted over the fire, its head and legs and inner parts. Do not leave any of it until morning. Before the morning, you must burn up any part that is left over.
so hopefully we're not, I think I'm running on 20 minutes of sleep or something. I feel like I'm shortchanging you. I don't want to skip around. The two things run very parallel. And he's telling them, you're about to be delivered. You understand? You're right on the cusp of deliverance. And I'm going to do this in a way that's going to leave no doubt in your mind that I did it. You didn't do this. You didn't contribute to it. You don't, and we want to do this and at the same time look forward and realize these similarities, these parallels. There's a point, most of you know the verse, by grace you're saved through faith, and even that not of yourself, so that nobody can boast. Well, look back at the original one. There's nothing for them to boast about. They're slaves, right? And he says, you're going to make a sacrifice and you're going to go inside your home and close the door. You're going to put the blood up, and then you're going to go sit inside your home and wait while I do the work. Later on, we have this burden of sin. We have this, this hostage situation, if you will, that we have no hope of curing on our own. It's the same story. It's the same thing. This was to show, to foreshadow, and it's given to them so that when the time comes, at least a lot of people are going to look at this and go, oh my gosh, I recognize this. This was the plan. So I want you to go and gather the animals. On the 14th, you're going to slaughter at this time. And then you're going to go have this meal. And it says they're to roast the meat and serve it with bitter herbs. And the bitter herbs are supposed to remind them of the bitterness of their life. They're in Egypt, right? It's not, it's not to make the meat more savory. It's bitter herbs. And you're gonna eat this. And I'm sorry, I'm going to keep skipping ahead of verse. Would you like to read some more?
I would.
Before we go,
Yes, sir.
what is the religious significance of the twilight? The sun goes down. Before we
There's
go
a
to the next
religious
day.
significance. It's just how they did days, and it's
No,
important for
it's got
us.
to be deeper than that.
Then
He
they have to be
selected a
deeper.
plan. That plan is, everything about that plan has religious significance. You either follow it, you don't follow it, you believe it. You can't do it 4 hours later because you're going to pay a price as they do in the other one. There's a plan for that. Either you human beings, you're out of your league. It's all me. You believe in me, you're okay. You don't, you got issues.
How about trust me for a minute, or trust us for a minute on this? Because what Mary says about the 12, I'll get.
All right.
For me, Genesis chapter 1, verse 5, God said that and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day.
True. It's the way they enumerate days, but he's saying, what was the significance about doing this sacrifice at that time? And is it significant, or is it just the plan? Not everything. Every time we see the number 3, it doesn't mean that it's God, right? I mean, humans tend to, oh my gosh, I can't say the name. All of a sudden, I can't say the word. Apophenia, is that right? Where we tend to see patterns. That's why we see crocodiles in the clouds and stuff. We see patterns where they don't really exist. We'll read them in. And not everything, but for right now, just look at this and say, this is what he told them to do. Okay? This is what he told them to do. And as far as they know, do they know any greater significance? I would suggest they probably don't. This is when they begin their days. They have their dinner. They have a day of preparation, because on the Sabbath, they can't cook. So they have to cook stuff that morning, that afternoon, and then when it gets to be dusk, the kitchen shuts down. And then they serve their evening Shabbat meal. So this is, is there some other, mathematical connection on the date and the time? I don't think so. But what I do know is he said, do this, and they did it. Let's start with that.
12, verse 11. This is how you are to eat it. You must be fully dressed for travel with your sandals on your feet and your staff in your hand. You are to eat it in haste. It's the Lord's Passover. On that night, I will pass through the land of Egypt and strike down every firstborn male, both man and beast, and I will execute judgment against all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood of the houses where you are staying will distinguish them. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. No plague will fall on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt.
And we want to try, and again, I hope I'm not skipping around too much, but we want to try and clear up some of the things that we see confusing people over the years, right? So he tells them to take the blood. And by the way, take note of the fact that he tells them to go out each household and get a lamb, right? And here I am, I'm losing. I am. I'm running a little slow, but he tells them to go out and pick the lamb, and they don't do a common sacrifice. They don't have a temple, right? But you know, in Jesus' time, they haul all the lambs down at the temple, and the temple does the slaughter. They were instructed explicitly to do this themselves. Normal sacrifices, the normal festival or remembrance, you know, Yom Kippur and all of those, that always gets done at the temple. But this one is done with your family. This one is done in your own home. It's unique. Yes, sir?
I know you're gonna hate me, brother, but sorry, you know, this sticks in my brain. So it says that if your lamb is too big for your family, go get your neighbor and share the lamb. So I guess two families get together, they each eat the piece in their own houses, and then but they do share the blood to
They do.
do the thing over there.
They do. And it is,
Sorry.
Mario mentions this too, the fact that it tells, and it's not so much if the lamb is too big for your family, it's if your family is too small
for the
for
lamb, yeah.
a whole lamb. Over and over again, man, I hope I don't lose you guys. I hope I'm not too scattered. John Paul, you want to say?
Well, I think when you say there's no waste. This is very safe. If your family isn't large enough, we're not gonna waste half the lamb. We're gonna share it with another family. They're gonna eat their thing, and you're gonna do it that way. And I think between the twilight, like sunset, he wants it when you can still see what you're doing, but it's not dark yet. It's like, I don't know, if you duck hunt, you're out there in the dark setting up, and then you're waiting for the sun to rise. But there's that moment where you can see them coming in, but you can't fire because it's not sunrise yet. And so then it's day. Well, he's saying, do it at the beginning, their day is in the evening. So you can do it at the beginning of right when the sun goes down, but before it gets dark. I don't want this done in the dark.
Well, that's the slaughter. That's the sacrifice.
Yeah.
The meal takes place. The meal is going to stretch over into the dark.
Yeah.
The thing I want to get to is what Mary just read. They're to take the hyssop and put the blood on the doorpost, on the lintel, on the crosspiece. And he says, when I see the blood, I'll pass by you. Does that mean that God wouldn't know who they were if they didn't have the blood there? John Paul, you want to answer it for me? I don't have to.
He knows who they are. They're acknowledging, they're submitting to his direction.
Marvelous.
They're
Marvelous.
obeying, yeah.
They're obeying.
Yeah.
They have to make a conscious, active choice.
Right.
They have to take an action. It's not done, this deliverance is not done to them over their dead body. They have to make a choice, don't they? And they make the choice. And it said that all the people followed the instructions. And so the blood is a part of this. They know that they've made a conscious, active choice. It is a thing where it cements that relationship. It's a very good answer. It's exactly right. That it's not saying that God
couldn't figure it
didn't
out.
tell them, I won't know who's who unless you put some of this blood. No, he's telling them because that's what they need to do. And then they understand the significance of the sacrifice and of the blood. And that then runs down through all of those, centuries. And we see it again. We see the exact parallel to it.
How about
The
this,
conscious
this
choice.
idea, you must be fully dressed for travel with your sandals in your feet and your staff in your hand.
So this is a deliverance, right? This is a rescue. And God says, I'm taking you out of here. When you do this meal, and even today, the really religious ones, but back then especially, they do this Passover meal. The man of the house wears a cloak and he has a belt, and they actually take the cloak and scoop it up and stick it down in their belt. They're fully dressed. They wear their sandals. Normally, they would not eat dinner that way. This is different. It has been set aside. And he says, you need to be ready to go. This is about to happen, folks. It's about to happen. And you need to be ready for this. So I want you to be fully dressed, your cloak stuffed inside your belt, your staff in your hand while you eat. Why would you do that? Well, it's because he's telling them, this is your deliverance. And you need to be ready for action. In Hebrew, every word is an action verb. Or not every word, every verb is an action verb. Every verb. And if you read Old Testament stuff in Hebrew, it seems like half the verses start with Waomer or Wailha, which means somebody did something. It's baked into their DNA. They are people of action. So when he says, you get ready, you're going to go, he's preparing them for what's about to happen. But they also see, once again, they're locked inside their houses, doors shut. God's going to go do it for them. So it's this kind of an amazing picture of what's going on.
We're almost finished. I'm going to read this.
Out of time?
Yeah. And this day, I'm verse 14, and this day will be a memorial for you, and you are to celebrate it as a feast to the Lord, as a permanent statute for generations to come. For 7 days, you must eat unleavened bread. On the first day, you're to remove the leaven from your house. Whoever eats anything leavened from the first day through the 7th must be cut off from Israel. On the first day, you're to hold a sacred assembly, and another on the 7th day. You must not do any work on those days, and except to prepare the meals. That is all you may do. So you are to keep the feast of unleavened bread. For this very day, I brought you divisions out of the land of Egypt, and you must keep this day as a permanent statute for generations to come. In the first month, you are to get unleavened bread from the evening of the 14th day until the evening of the 21st day. For 7 days, there must be no leaven found in your house. If anyone eats something leavened, that person, whether a foreigner or a native of the land, must be cut off from the congregation of Israel. You are not to eat anything leavened. Eat unleavened bread in all your homes. Then Moses summoned the elders of Israel and told them, go at once and select for yourself a lamb for each family and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a cluster of hyssop, dip it into the blood in the basin, and brush the blood on top and on the sides of the door frame. None of you shall go out of the door of his house until morning. When the Lord passes through to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top and the side of the door frame and will pass over the doorway. So he will not allow the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down. And you are to keep this command as a permanent statute for you and your descendants. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you as promised, you are to keep this service. When your children ask you, what does this service mean to you? You are to reply, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when he struck down the Egyptians and spared our homes. Then the people bowed down and worshiped, and the Israelites went and did just what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron.
So if there's more significance to the time of day, I don't know what it is. What we are told very explicitly is that they obeyed. You know, this is when you do it, this is what you do, and they did it. And there is this active choice to obey. That was their whole role in this. The idea of the blood, and if anybody wants to ask me why is that necessary, I don't know. You know, I don't always know the mechanics of these things, but I know that we look at this story and we look at the one in Jerusalem all those centuries later, and the parallels are almost, they're shocking.
The
But-
one thing we should note here, there's two feasts here. There's the feast of the Passover, and the Passover took place on the 14th of Nisan. And then the Feast of Unleavened Bread starts the next day and goes for 7 days. Okay. And what we'll see in the next couple of weeks is the Jewish people and now sort of combine everything. But the Passover was on the 14th. And it was the celebration, or not celebration, the remembrance of that last meal. The Feast of the Unleavened Bread is the fact that they were leaving and they didn't have time to.
I don't want to leave it hanging right there. I don't know how it got off to a late start or something. But I really want to cover this part. They do what they're told. They put the blood on the doorpost on the lintel. They do they've done the sacrifice, they do the meal. And you remember when Jesus says you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood? Well, here we are. And he tells them, you're about to be delivered. It's imminent. And when the time comes, you're going to have to leave stuff behind. Do you remember the man who said he wanted to follow Jesus? And he says, well, come on. He says, well, can I just go back and bury my dad? Right? And can I just go take care of some business? And he says, let the dead bury the dead. You come with me. And the guy he couldn't make himself do that. And so what they're being told is, you're going to leave a whole bunch of stuff. This is imminent. It's about to happen. And I know I've been trying to skip ahead all day. I'm going to skip ahead just a teeny little bit because I have to. The next morning, these deaths, they wake up in the middle of the night, and we'll still read it next week. But these deaths, all of a sudden, Pharaoh discovers, and it is this tragedy in the entire land of Egypt. And wailing, and they begin to, as the ruckus progresses, they go check. And it says there's not a household in Egypt that hasn't been touched by this. And Pharaoh calls them in, and we're told he calls them in at night, before daylight, right? He gets up somewhere in the middle of the night, other people do, they discover this plague, this death, and he says, okay, you're out of here. I want you gone and all your people gone right now. Nobody would have guessed after 9 plagues and the disappointment and everything, when it finally came, it came like that. This is when he says, I'm coming back. Nobody's going to know the hour or the day, right? You're going to come like a thief in the night. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen fast, and you're going to be surprised by it. Well, here they are. I want you out of here, and I'm going to go because we do have to stop. It said, But the last thing that Pharaoh says when he calls Moses and Aaron, he says, I want you to take all your people and all your cattle and all your stuff, and I want you out of here. Oh, and bless me. Just it's in there. And so he's done something for the Israelites. And so he wants a reward for it. I want to be sure I'm on the good side of this God you worship. So on your way out, I want you to bless me through this, Yahweh. So that this is going to be the end of it, right? It is a thing that happened between, consider how few hours pass between the sacrifice that happens at twilight and when they're told they're free.
12 hours.
It's not very long. It's just like it boom, once it happens, it happens. And they didn't have to do anything else. God's taken care of it. The substitute sacrifice has been taken care of. That's what happens all those years later. So is there anything else you want to cover on this? Sorry, I skipped ahead. The reason we wanted to go over all this, as we started, we get told people want to say, well, you know what, your dates don't add up. It wasn't really 3 days. Couldn't have been. He couldn't have been crucified and then risen on the third day because the days don't line up. Well, they really do. And we'll show you that. That's why we started with the idea that day begins at evening, because what you're going to see when Jesus is risen, it's on the third day. It is on the third day. It is not 72 hours. And this is what this is like where I started with the thing about Easter being a pagan celebration. People just say a whole bunch of stuff. And if you don't know what we're going over, you wind up thinking, maybe I'm not on such solid ground here. This sounds inconsistent. It's not. It is the third day. It didn't say it is exactly 72 hours after this. And it all begins to make sense. All of this stuff that a lot of us have grown up having people tell us, it wasn't really the third day. It isn't really Sunday. It would have had to have been Monday. Yeah. They were told to begin the Passover preparation on the 14th. But they get told to leave Egypt. Pharaoh calls in and says, you leave. When was that? Why, the next morning. It's still the 14th. It's still the 14th because the 15th doesn't come until the evening, right? So the 14th is the first day. The 15th, the 6th, that's the third day. And that would be our Sunday when he's risen. So it actually does wind up adding up. It just gets confusing because we start our days at a different time. It's there. We'll go over it next week, Mario, but I promise you, we've been over it this week enough times. It really does make sense. So I don't know, anything else?
No,
Relate? And I help Mary and I. This is a difficult sometimes study. This is difficult to understand. Help us not to get lost in the wrong details, in things we've been coached to believe, and instead to see through it as we're supposed to, and see this incredible plan that you put in place that later comes to include us. And we're thankful for this. We're thankful for those that come. These ones that are on our minds, our concern for them. And the fact that we bring them to you, that we bring them in our prayers to you, is what you've laid out for us. We're grateful for it. We're most thankful for the sacrifice. We're most thankful for the atonement that sets us free, that has set us free. And our lack of understanding doesn't diminish the power of that. Always be with us this week. Remind us, we know you're there with us. We look past it. Remind us this week. Show us your hand in the world around us and in our own lives, and the magnificence of this plan, including us. Amen.
Thank you,
Yeah, it's going to
guys.
show a bunch of stuff, Mara. A lot of the calculations and everything, they're going to shake out. It's one of those that we've read so much myth about it. I have, that we've sat down and actually started, we parsed it out on like a calendar sheet.
There you go. You guys enjoy Mexico City and have a good week.
Okay.
See you guys later. Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor.
Okay.
Bye-bye.